Have you ever wanted to learn about politics, but never knew where to start? The internet can be an intimidating place, filled with bias, misleading information, and propaganda, especially in the realm of politics. The Citizen's Compass is here to offer you digestible and easy to understand political issues from all sides. The importance of understanding different viewpoints for fostering productive conversations and informed decision-making cannot be understated. As the timeless trope goes, knowledge is power, and the more informed you are, the better off you and your family will be. On this episode of the Citizen's Compass, we will be discussing capital punishment. Capital punishment, or the more commonly known term, the death penalty, is a hotly debated issue in American politics, as well as on the world stage. The main two parties on this issue either believe in the existence and justification of the death penalty, and those that do not support one at all. Here are some things to know. The most common administration of capital punishment is lethal injection. Typically, a 3-drug protocol is used, involving an anesthetic or sedative, a paralytic drug, and a drug to stop the heart. Alabama allows death by electrocution of nitrogen hypoxia, where one wears a mask where they inhale pure nitrogen gas, if requested in writing. California allows the death penalty by gas if requested. Georgia ruled in 2001 that the electric chair was cruel and unusual. Louisiana allows lethal injection, nitrogen hypoxia, or electrocution. South Carolina allows choice between lethal injection or electrocution. Utah allows death by firing squad, which is when multiple people shoot an inmate until they're dead, if lethal injection is unavailable or deemed unconstitutional. Virginia allows the choice between lethal injection and electrocution, and Washington State allows the inmate to choose to be hung. Now we're going to cover some landmark cases. The Eighth Amendment includes the prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment. Although this phrase exists, it does not include specifics, in turn leaving interpretation up to courts in the United States. The first landmark case is Ingram v. Wright, 1977, where the Supreme Court stated that the, quote, unnecessary and wanton infliction of pain, close quote, constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. This standard was refined in Whitley v. Albers in 1986, in which the Supreme Court stated that action that may seem like an unconstitutional or unnecessary and wanton infliction of pain may be constitutional if the infliction of pain is done in a good faith effort to restore discipline rather than done maliciously to cause harm. In Brown v. Plata, in 2011, the Supreme Court held that prison overcrowding in California was unconstitutional because the living conditions resulted in medical care violations. The court reasoned that prisoners would suffer and could die if they did not receive adequate medical care. In Solemn v. Helm, 1983, the Supreme Court held that a sentence may not be disproportionate to the crime committed, regardless of whether the crime is a felony or a misdemeanor. To measure proportionality, the court must look at several factors. These factors include the severity of the offense, the harshness of the penalty, the sentences imposed on others within the same jurisdiction, and the sentences imposed on others in different jurisdictions. The Supreme Court later overturned this prohibition on disproportionate sentences in Harmelin v. Michigan in 1991, but stated, in dicta, that in extreme cases, a disproportionate sentence could violate the Eighth Amendment. This opinion was later affirmed in Lockyer v. Andrade in 2003, holding that a gross proportionality requirement is only available in exceedingly rare and extreme cases. Glossop v. Gross in 2015 was a Supreme Court case taking place in Oklahoma, in which prison inmates claimed that lethal injection was a violation of the Eighth Amendment. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 against the inmates and upheld Oklahoma's adoption of the lethal injection. Moving on to some important statistics to know before we get into the two arguments. 1,591 people have been executed in the United States since the 1970s. 9 people were executed in 2024 so far, all male, 1 by nitrogen hypoxia, and 8 by lethal injection. China has executed at least 8,000 people a year since 2022. China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United States have executed the most people since 2022. The average death penalty case costs taxpayers $1.26 million per person, including the execution, or $1.1 million before the execution. This includes often lengthier trials and legal costs, the cost of incarceration, which includes more security and sometimes solitary confinement, and appeals. Just over 7% of death row prisoners die before being executed, effectively serving life in prison instead of the death penalty. An average of about 4 wrongfully convicted death row prisoners are exonerated per year. Now, we will hear from the pro-capital punishment or pro-death penalty argument.
Supporting the death penalty means advocating for justice and the protection of society by ensuring that the most heinous criminals face the ultimate consequence for their actions. Just as being pro-law enforcement values the safety and security provided by those who uphold the law, being pro-death penalty respects the need for a strong deterrent against the gravest offenses, such as murder and acts of terrorism. The death penalty serves as a powerful deterrent, signaling that society will not tolerate the most egregious crimes and that there are severe consequences for such actions. One important aspect, often overlooked, is the sense of closure and justice it provides to the victims' families. Instead of allowing perpetrators to live out their lives in prison, the death penalty can offer a sense of finality and retribution, acknowledging the severity of the crime and the suffering endured by the victims' loved ones. Many proponents argue that the death penalty is a necessary tool in the criminal justice system, reserved for the most dangerous and irredeemable offenders who pose a continuous threat to society. Furthermore, studies have shown that the death penalty can have a deterrent effect, preventing future crimes by making potential criminals think twice about committing capital offenses. In states where the death penalty is enforced, there is a clear message that society takes the protection of its citizens seriously and will use the full extent of the law to maintain order and safety. The death penalty, supported by a rigorous legal process, upholds justice and serves as a crucial element in maintaining law and order. In the end, supporting the death penalty is about upholding justice and ensuring the safety of society through the appropriate punishment of the most severe crimes. It aligns with the principle of valuing the lives and well-being of innocent citizens and the belief that certain offenses are so grievous that they warrant the ultimate penalty. Just as law enforcement works to protect communities, the death penalty serves as a critical component in the pursuit of justice and the protection of society.
I am anti-capital punishment and anti-death penalty. Opposing the death penalty means advocating for a more humane and just approach to criminal justice that prioritizes rehabilitation over retribution. It involves recognizing the inherent flaws and risks in the death penalty system, including the potential for wrongful convictions and the disproportionate impact on marginalized communities. One important aspect, often overlooked, is the moral and ethical implications of taking a human life, even in the context of punishment. The death penalty perpetuates a cycle of violence and does not align with the principles of human rights and dignity. Many opponents argue that life imprisonment without parole is a more effective and human alternative, ensuring that dangerous criminals are removed from society without resorting to the irreversible act of execution. Studies have shown that the death penalty is not a more effective deterrent to crime than life imprisonment. In fact, many regions with the death penalty continue to experience high rates of violent crime. The resources spent on lengthy and costly death penalty trials could be better utilized in crime prevention and rehabilitation programs, addressing the root causes of criminal behavior and reducing recidivism. Ultimately, opposing the death penalty is about advocating for a criminal justice system that values human life and seeks to rehabilitate rather than punish. It is about recognizing the potential for irreversible mistakes and the inequities in the application of the death penalty. By focusing on rehabilitation and preventive measures, society can create a more just and humane approach to justice that upholds the dignity and rights of all individuals. In the end, while the opposing sides may be cut and dry when it comes to the death penalty, the factors that drive attitudes on it certainly are not. There are moral, religious, and ethical implications that can affect one's views on it, and it's important to keep that in mind. With all political discussions, it is vital to exercise empathy and good faith debating. Remember, there is nothing wrong with establishing a position and defending it as long as you do so respectfully. And make sure to come to conclusions on your own. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Citizen's Compass. Until next time, free and independent thinking is key, and knowledge is power.